When my new daughter-in-law looked at my wedding gift and laughed, saying, "Is this all?" I didn't say a word. I simply smiled, even though my heart ached. She had no idea what was hidden inside that old envelope. It wasn't money or jewelry. It was something that carried a lifetime of love, sacrifice, and a secret I had kept for over 20 years. If you're still watching, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what happened next left everyone speechless. My name is Evelyn Carter, and this is the story of how one simple gift changed everything at my son's wedding. I raised my son, Daniel, on my own after losing my husband in a construction accident when Daniel was just 8. Back then, life was hard. We lived in a small house with thin walls and a leaky roof, but we had laughter and love. Every morning, Daniel would wave at me from the porch as I headed to the school where I taught. Every evening, I came home to his drawings on the kitchen table and his promise that one day he'd make my life easier. He kept that promise. After years of studying, working part-time jobs, and pushing through every obstacle, Daniel built a good life for himself. He became a software engineer, bought a car, and eventually met Alyssa Morgan, a beautiful young woman from a wealthy family. She was elegant, confident, and always dressed like she was stepping out of a magazine. Daniel adored her. And even though I felt a quiet distance between us, I wanted to love her too, for his sake. The weeks before the wedding were full of joy and nerves. I spent my days sewing table linens, baking small batches of cookies, and thinking of the perfect gift for my son. I didn't have much money, but I had something more valuable, something that carried the story of our life together. Late one night, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a small wooden box I'd kept hidden in my closet for years. Inside was an old house key, slightly rusted, but still strong. It belonged to the first home I ever bought, a home built on dreams and sacrifice. Alongside it was a photograph of Daniel as a boy, holding the same key and smiling with missing front teeth. I also had one more thing, a letter written by hand on aged stationery. It wasn't just a message. It was a confession of love and a gift that would change everything. On the day of the wedding, the world felt magical. The church was decorated with white roses, the music soft and graceful, and Daniel looked so proud in his tuxedo that I could hardly believe he was the same boy who once carried lunch in a paper bag and said he'd buy me a mansion someday. When he saw me, he hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm so glad you're here, Mom." After the ceremony, the reception sparkled with elegance. The hall shimmered with chandeliers, champagne glasses clinked, and laughter filled the air. I felt small in my simple blue dress among the designer gowns, but I reminded myself that love didn't need a label. When the time came for gifts, I placed my plain cream-colored envelope on the table among the glossy boxes and silver wrapping paper. I saw Alyssa glance at it and smirk slightly before turning back to her friends. Maybe she thought it looked old-fashioned. Maybe she thought it looked cheap, but I told myself it didn't matter. I had poured everything that mattered into that envelope. As the evening went on, I watched my son and his new wife dance under the lights. They looked happy, and even though I noticed Alyssa's mother whispering something in her ear while glancing in my direction, I stayed quiet. I had learned a long time ago that silence often spoke louder than words. Later that night, when they began opening the gifts, laughter and excitement filled the air. Each gift was more extravagant than the last. Cash envelopes, gold watches, designer purses. Then, Alyssa reached for mine. The moment her manicured fingers opened it, I felt my pulse quicken. Inside was the letter, the photo, and the small old key tied with a red ribbon. She pulled out the key, stared at it, and said with a little laugh, "Is this all?" A few guests nearby chuckled. My son's face fell, and he tried to cover the awkward silence with a forced smile. I felt the sting of embarrassment, but I didn't let it show. I stood tall, my hands folded in front of me. "It's something very close to my heart," I said softly. "You'll understand one day." Alyssa shrugged and set the envelope aside, turning quickly to open the next gift. I saw Daniel glance at me, guilt flickering in his eyes, but I gave him a small nod. There was no anger in me, only a deep sadness. That night, when I went home, I sat on the porch of my old house with a cup of tea in my hands. The laughter from the wedding still echoed in my ears, but I couldn't stop thinking about Alyssa's words. Is this all? I smiled to myself, a quiet, knowing smile, because soon she would realize what that little envelope really meant. The night after the wedding, I couldn't sleep. The laughter from the reception kept playing in my mind, but this time, it wasn't joyful, it was mocking. I kept seeing Alyssa's expression when she held that envelope up for everyone to see, the slight smirk, the whisper to her friend, the way she tossed it aside like it meant nothing. I tried to tell myself she was just nervous or overwhelmed, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that. It was pride, and pride had a way of blinding people to the things that truly mattered. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. His voice sounded hesitant. "Mom, about last night, Alyssa didn't mean anything by what she said. She just didn't understand the gift." I took a breath before answering. "I know, sweetheart. Don't worry about it." He sighed with relief. "You're not upset?" "No," I said softly. "A gift doesn't lose its meaning because someone doesn't see its value." I meant the words, but my heart still ached. After we hung up, I sat by the window and watched the rain fall over the garden. The flowers I had planted years ago swayed in the wind, still standing tall despite the storm. Maybe that's what love was, standing tall even when no one noticed your roots. Days passed, and I heard nothing more about the gift. I assumed Alyssa had forgotten about it, or maybe Daniel had tucked it away somewhere. But a week later, something unexpected happened. I received an invitation to their new home for Sunday brunch. It was written in Alyssa's elegant handwriting. I hesitated before going. A part of me feared it would be awkward, but another part hoped it was a chance to start fresh. Their house was beautiful, modern, bright, and filled with the kind of furniture you only saw in magazines. Alyssa greeted me at the door, her smile polite, but tight. "Come in, Mrs. Carter," she said, her tone more formal than warm. "Please call me Evelyn," I replied, stepping inside. Daniel came over with his usual warmth. "Mom, you made it." He gave me a quick hug, and for a moment, it felt like the old days again, but I could sense a strange tension in the air, something unspoken between them. As we sat down, Alyssa began showing me around the house. She talked about their plans, the decor, and the expensive art pieces she wanted to buy. When we reached the living room, she stopped suddenly and pointed to a side table. "I found your gift," she said, almost casually. The cream-colored envelope sat there, unopened. I looked at it quietly. "You haven't read it yet?" Alyssa smiled faintly. "I was going to, but Daniel said it was personal, so I didn't want to intrude. It's meant for both of you," I said gently. "It's something I wanted to share with the two of you together." Daniel glanced between us. "Maybe we should open it now." Alyssa hesitated but finally nodded. She picked it up and carefully untied the red ribbon. When she unfolded the letter, her voice was light at first, but as she began reading, it started to tremble. It said, "To my son and his bride, this key once opened the first door I ever called my own. I bought that small house after your father passed away. Every dollar I earned as a teacher went into paying for it. It's where Daniel learned to walk, where he took his first steps, where I tucked him in at night and told him his father was watching over us. This key belongs to you now. The house is yours. It's my wedding gift to you both, a place where love began and can begin again." When she finished reading, there was silence. Alyssa's hand trembled as she looked at the key. Her eyes darted from the letter to me, then to Daniel. "The house?" she whispered. "You're giving us your house?" I nodded. "Yes. I wanted you to have a home built on something real, something earned with love, not money." Her lips parted, but no words came out. The confident woman who had once mocked my gift now looked uncertain, humbled. She set the letter down carefully, her expression unreadable. Daniel stared at me, his eyes full of emotion. "Mom, you didn't have to do this." I smiled faintly. "I wanted to. That house carries your father's memory. It's where you learned what family means. Now it's your turn to build your own memories there." Alyssa stood frozen for a long moment before quietly excusing herself. She disappeared into another room and I could hear her crying softly. I didn't follow. Some lessons, I knew, had to settle quietly. Daniel reached over and took my hand. "She'll come around, Mom. She didn't understand." I looked at him and said, Understanding comes when pride fades. Give her time. Later, when Alyssa returned, her eyes were red but softer. She whispered, "I didn't know. I'm so sorry for how I acted." I smiled gently. "Now you do. That's all that matters." As I left their house that afternoon, the sun broke through the clouds. It felt like something heavy had lifted, as if love had finally spoken louder than pride. That evening, after leaving Daniel and Alyssa's house, I drove straight home in silence. The sky was painted in shades of gold and purple, and as I passed the familiar road leading to the little house I had given them, my chest ached with both pride and sadness. I had done what any mother would do, given away the best of what I had to the person I loved most. But still, I couldn't shake the memory of Alyssa's laughter on their wedding day. I knew she was embarrassed by her reaction, but something in me still felt wounded. That sting of humiliation was small compared to the deeper feeling that I had lost something more than a house. I had given away the place that held my entire life's story. When I got home, I sat on the porch steps and looked at the now empty window boxes where flowers once grew. The silence felt strange. For years, Daniel's laughter had filled this space, his toys scattered across the living room, his shoes left by the door. Now, the house belonged to no one. The walls were bare, the air heavy. I wrapped my arms around myself, whispering, "It's just a building." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was the last piece of my past, and letting it go had taken a part of me with it. The next morning, I decided to visit the house one last time before the official ownership papers were transferred. I called Daniel to let him know I was stopping by. He sounded happy. "Come by anytime, Mom. Alyssa's been working on decorating. I think you'll like what she's done." When I arrived, I parked across the street and sat in my car for a moment, watching through the front window. Alyssa was there, arranging flowers in a vase. She moved carefully, almost nervously, and when she looked up, she saw me. For a second, our eyes met. She smiled, tentatively at first, then warmly, and waved for me to come in. Inside, the house felt different. It was brighter, more open, but still familiar. My old curtains were gone, replaced with white lace ones that fluttered in the breeze. The family photographs I had taken down before the move were back on the walls. My wedding picture, Daniel's school photo, even the one of him sitting on the porch with our old dog. Alyssa had put them up again. "I hope you don't mind," she said softly when she noticed me looking at them. "Daniel found them in a box and said they belong here. I think he's right." Her tone was gentle, nothing like the sharp confidence she used to wear like perfume. I smiled. "They do belong here," I said quietly. "Thank you for putting them up." She nodded, twisting her hands nervously. I wanted to apologize again. What I said at the wedding? It was cruel. I was so caught up in how things looked that I forgot what they meant. I thought gifts were about value, not love. I walked closer and touched her shoulder. "You're learning something that takes most people a lifetime to understand. The prettiest things fade, but the things given with love last forever." Her eyes filled with tears. "You gave us more than a house, Evelyn. You gave us a story. I found Daniel reading your letter again last night. He said it made him cry." I smiled at that. "He's always been sentimental." Alyssa let out a soft laugh, then took my hands in hers. "I want you to know you're always welcome here. This will always be your home, too." I felt my throat tighten. "That means more than you know." Just then, Daniel walked in from the backyard, holding a box of tools. "Hey, Mom, Alyssa's been planning some changes, but don't worry. We're keeping everything important." He grinned, glancing around the room. "This place has too many memories to erase." Watching them together made something inside me settle. The awkwardness between Alyssa and me had softened into understanding. The distance that once felt wide was beginning to close. Later, as I sat with them on the porch, the same spot where Daniel used to play as a child, Alyssa handed me a small envelope. "This is for you," she said. Inside was a delicate silver locket. When I opened it, there were two tiny photos, one of Daniel as a child and one of Alyssa in her wedding dress. On the back, engraved in small letters, were the words, "Thank you for giving us a home and a heart." For the first time in a long while, I felt tears spill freely down my cheeks. But this time, they were warm, not bitter. I hugged her tightly and she didn't pull away. In that moment, I realized that love doesn't always come easily. It grows through patience, forgiveness, and understanding. As the sun dipped low, Daniel brought out a tray of lemonade, and we sat together, laughing and talking. For the first time, it truly felt like a family again. No barriers, no judgment, just simple love. When I drove home that night, the house no longer felt empty. I understood something new. The value of a gift isn't measured by what it costs, but by what it means to the heart that receives it. If you're still watching, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because sometimes the smallest act of love can heal the biggest divide. A few weeks after that visit, life seemed to settle into something warm and peaceful. Alyssa started calling me more often, asking for recipes, talking about her new job, even checking in just to say good morning. The coldness that once filled her tone was gone. It felt like I had gained a daughter, not just through marriage, but through forgiveness. Yet, one Saturday morning, something unexpected happened that brought everything full circle and revealed just how deeply that old envelope had changed all of us. I woke up to a soft knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Daniel stood there with Alyssa beside him, both smiling in that shy, almost nervous way people do when they have something to say. "Morning, Mom," Daniel said. "We were wondering if you could come somewhere with us." I looked at them, puzzled but curious. "Where are we going?" Alyssa grinned. "You'll see. Just grab a sweater." They drove in silence for a while, the summer sun streaming through the windows, the air thick with quiet anticipation. We turned off the main road, and as the car slowed, my breath caught. We were back at the house, the one I'd given them, but something was different. The lawn was freshly mowed, flowers bloomed along the walkway, and a new coat of paint brightened the front door. It looked alive again. Daniel parked and turned to me. "We've been working on something," he said. "You always said this house held memories. We wanted to make sure it keeps holding them." I stepped out of the car, my heart already swelling with emotion. The moment I reached the porch, I noticed a small brass plaque next to the door. It read, "The Carter Home, built with love, given with love." Tears filled my eyes. I looked at Alyssa, who smiled gently. "We wanted to honor you," she said softly. "We thought this house deserved your name on it too." Before I could speak, Daniel handed me a folder. "There's something else," he said. "Open it." Inside was a set of new property documents. At first, I didn't understand. Then I saw my name listed again as a co-owner. "Daniel, what is this?" He grinned. "You gave this house to us, but we realized it was never just ours. It's home for all of us, past, present, and future. So we added your name back. You'll always have a place here." I pressed a hand to my mouth, trying to hold back the sob that rose in my throat. "You didn't have to do this," I whispered. Alyssa stepped closer, taking my hand. "We wanted to." That envelope taught us something. It wasn't just a gift. It was a reminder of what family really means. I was so focused on appearances that I almost missed the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me. I could see sincerity shining in her eyes. The same woman who once laughed at my gift was now the one teaching me that people can change when given the chance. They led me inside, and I couldn't believe what I saw. The living room had been transformed into a space that felt both new and familiar. On one wall, framed neatly under glass, hung my original letter, the same one Alyssa had once mocked. Above it, the old house key was mounted in a small wooden frame, polished and shining. Beneath the frame, a handwritten plaque read, "This key opened more than a door. It opened a legacy." I traced my fingers across the glass, speechless. Every word I had written to them, every tear I had shed while writing that letter, now hung there as a symbol of something far greater than I could have imagined. Daniel put his arm around my shoulder. "We wanted everyone who walks into this house to know the story behind it. It's not just a home, Mom. It's a reminder of your love, your strength, and your belief in what really matters." Alyssa nodded. "Every time I look at that letter, I remember what kind of woman I want to be. I was wrong that day, Evelyn. I judged you by what you had instead of who you are. But now I understand that your love built everything we have." I turned to her, eyes wet, but smiling. You've learned something beautiful, my dear. The greatest gifts are never wrapped in gold. They're written in the hearts that give them. She leaned in and hugged me tightly, and this time, I could feel it was real. Not a polite hug, not one out of obligation, but the kind that carries forgiveness and love in equal measure. Later that afternoon, we sat together on the porch as Daniel grilled lunch in the yard. Alyssa brought out lemonade, laughing at how I had always said her cooking skills were a work in progress. The air was filled with warmth, the kind that only comes when hearts have healed. When we ate, Daniel raised his glass. To Mom, he said proudly, the woman who gave us a house and taught us what a home really is. We all clinked glasses, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. The light filtered softly through the trees. The breeze carried laughter, and I realized something powerful. Every ounce of pain, every sacrifice, every lonely night had led to this exact moment. It was worth it. As the sun dipped low, Alyssa reached for my hand and said, I hope one day I can give our children a gift as meaningful as the one you gave us. I smiled, my heart full. You already have, I said. You've given me back something I thought I'd lost. My family. That evening, when I left, I looked back one last time. The porch light was on, the curtains glowed softly from inside, and I could see Daniel and Alyssa standing together by the framed key. The gift I once feared was misunderstood had turned into a legacy of love, humility, and belonging. It's been a year since that day, and I still remember every detail. The laughter, the warmth, the feeling of standing on that porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. Life has changed in ways I never expected. The house that once belonged only to my memories has become a living story again. Every time I visit, I can hear the echoes of Daniel's childhood and feel the new laughter that fills the same rooms. Alyssa greets me with open arms now, and every visit begins with a hug, not hesitation. Sometimes when I walk through the garden, I see how she's added her own touch. The flower beds that used to hold wild daisies now bloom with roses and lavender. The swing Daniel and his father built still hangs from the oak tree, freshly painted and sturdy. I often find Alyssa sitting on it in the evenings, humming softly to herself. One evening, I joined her there, and she said something that stayed with me. I used to think wealth meant never having to need anything, she said quietly. But you showed me that real wealth is in giving. You gave us more than a home. You gave us a lesson I'll never forget. I smiled, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Love has a way of teaching what money never can, I said. It humbles us. It reminds us that kindness lasts longer than anything you can buy. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I get that now. You know, I look at that framed letter every morning before I start the day. It reminds me to be grateful. I looked up at the window, where I could see the faint glow of that framed letter through the glass. The same old envelope that once brought embarrassment now brought pride to their hearts. It was funny how life worked, how something so simple could shift the meaning of everything around it. Not long after, Daniel and Alyssa invited me to a small family dinner. It wasn't a big event, just a quiet evening with a few close friends. When I arrived, the house was filled with soft music and the smell of homemade lasagna. Alyssa was in the kitchen, apron on, flour dusting her cheek, while Daniel set the table with mismatched plates that somehow looked perfect together. I couldn't help but smile. This was love in its purest form, imperfect, genuine, and warm. During dinner, they shared some exciting news. Alyssa was expecting. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My eyes filled with tears as Daniel squeezed my hand. We wanted you to be the first to know, he said. You're going to be a grandmother. The room blurred with emotion. All I could do was laugh and cry at the same time. A grandmother, I whispered, tasting the words like something sweet and new. Your father would be so proud of you, Daniel. Alyssa smiled softly. We already picked out the nursery room, she said. It's going to be the same one Daniel had as a child. We want our baby to grow up surrounded by love and by the memories that built this family. I felt something in me finally rest. It was as if the circle had closed. Everything I had ever hoped for had come back to me, not in grand gestures, but in the simple moments. The laughter around the dinner table, the smell of good food, The promise of a new life beginning in the same place where it all started. When the night ended, Alyssa walked me to the door. The air outside was cool and smelled faintly of rain. "You know," she said, "I still think about that day at the wedding. I was so blind back then." I placed a gentle hand on her cheek. "You were young. Sometimes we only learn the value of something after we almost lose it." She nodded slowly. "I'll make sure our child grows up knowing that lesson too." As I drove home that night, the lights of the city shimmered through my windshield. I thought about everything that had happened. The struggle, the misunderstanding, the healing, and realized that the real gift had never been the house or the key. It was the bond that grew from it. It was forgiveness, empathy, and the quiet power of love that doesn't demand to be recognized, but simply endures. A few weeks later, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was a photo frame with a picture of Daniel and Alyssa standing in front of the house, holding the framed key between them. Attached was a handwritten note that said, "Thank you for giving us more than a place to live. You gave us a reason to grow." I placed it on my bedside table, next to the last photo I had of Daniel's father. Looking at both side by side, I felt peace. My heart was full, not because of what I gave away, but because of what I received in return. A family stronger, wiser, and bound by the kind of love that no amount of money can ever buy. Every time I visit now, the door opens before I can even knock. Alyssa greets me with a smile. Daniel wraps me in a hug, and the sound of laughter fills the home again. The walls that once echoed with loss now breathe with life. And sometimes, when I stand by that framed letter, I whisper to myself, "This is what love builds." Life has a way of surprising us. What begins as pain can turn into something beautiful if we choose love instead of bitterness. I once thought I was giving up everything. Now I know I was simply passing love forward. If you're still watching, make sure to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this remind us that the greatest gifts in life aren't the ones we keep, but the ones we give.